time to talk about the incredible and deserved comeback at Alkermes, ALKS, the drug delivery company that also develops its own proprietary medications for mental illness, addiction, diabetes, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis. Here's a stock that had a tremendous long-term track record, rocketing higher year after year. Then in late January, it fell off a cliff when the company's big new depression drug failed to meet the primary endpoint in its phase 3 clinical trial. Alkermes fell from $60 down to $33 a single session. After spending some time in the wilderness, though, the stock began to make its way higher again in recent months, in part because Alkermes has a bunch of other solid franchises. I'm talking about Vivitrol, their once-monthly injection for recovering addicts, Aristada, the company's long-acting antipsychotic drug for people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder who often don't take their medicine after a certain point. This, I think, solves some of that problem. But it was last week when Alkermes really got roaring again. The company announced some very positive clinical trial data for the same antidepressant that had previously failed to meet its targets. It caused the stock to get obliterated back in January. In response, the stock surged close to 30% in one day because this depression drug seems to be incredibly effective. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's got more room to run. So let's dig deeper with Richard Pops. He's the chairman and CEO of Alkermes. Hear more about this new antidepressant, where the company said it. Mr. Pops, welcome back to Mad Money. Good to see you, Richard. Thank you. Have a seat. Okay, so walk through how it happens. First, the drug fails its primary endpoint. You very emphatically in the release said, listen, don't write us off. This could be good. And then it does work. What occurred in that period? And why is this drug different from the others?
So first of all, doing clinical research in depression is incredibly difficult because when you enroll patients in a clinical trial for depression, many of the patients just get better by virtue of being in the trial itself. It's called the placebo effect.
Okay.
So when the study failed in January, we looked at the data. And the data always tells you the truth. And in those data, we saw a clear signal of activity of 5461. We just hadn't designed the trial exactly the right way. So we went back to work, designed the trial slightly differently, the ongoing study.
Right.
And sure enough, this fall, when we unblinded the most recent study, the drug continues to reveal itself. So there's nothing actually new.
Okay.
It's just it's almost like we're dialing in the radio station. You can hear the static, and you dial it in, and that's what we're figuring out with 5461.
Okay, if that's the case, how big could the market be, and who would take this versus just people currently, there's nothing available?
Well, the depression market, I prefer to think of it not in terms of market terms, I think of it people. It's,
right. Yes.
There are 11, 12 million people a year who go on antidepressants in the U.S., but fully a third of them don't get adequate clinical relief from the drugs, you know, the Prozacs, the Paxils, the SSRIs. So the amount of suffering from depression is extreme. And it's a lethal disease, as we all know. So our idea was to test this drug not in the patients who are getting some relief from the SSRIs. Okay. In fact, we deliberately have chosen to focus on only those patients who are not getting adequate clinical relief. So we're testing 5461 in those resistant patients, and that's where we're showing the benefit.
Well, how about the medical makeup? Is it something like that provides a degree of, say, for lack of a better term, a high, but is not addictive?
Well, there's a long literature on the use of what are called opioid medications that affect mood. Right. The problem with opioids is that they're addictive. So the contribution we've made with 5461 is our reasoning was that we could actually remove the addictive potential while still triggering that opioid system response to mood. And so far, that's proven to be correct.
That's the holy grail, Richard. That's why I was so excited about this. If you could do that, that has applications through many different problems of addiction in this country.
Well, we hope so. We hope so. But as you know, this is a deliberate, slow,
and you want to stick with what, I'm not trying to get people to take anything up front, but you know how concerned I am about the notion of opioids, how this is the great epidemic in this country. For some reason, it's not talked about except for by you.
That's right. And you know, one of our hypotheses is that many people take opioids not for their physical pain, but almost for their psychic pain.
Yes.
And it's depression and things like that. So 5461, we think, not just in our hands, but open up this whole field of pharmacology for others to interrogate.
Okay, well, let's talk about Vivitrol. I mean, I read a book, Dreamland. Everyone's got these stories that you read, but black tar heroin, cheaper than opioids. Hospitals shut down the opioids. Doctors won't give them to you. People resort to what it could end up being something where they die of an overdose. Where can Vivitrol fight and be in this whole terrible arc of tragedy in our country?
Well, what's exciting to see, and you identified this years ago, Jim, is that Vivitrol has a real role to play because it's the only medicine that blocks the opioid receptor and prevents relapse to opioid dependence. It's not just heroin now, it's fentanyl, carfentanil.
Yes, it's fentanyl, incredible.
And this is ravaging communities across the U.S. And so Vivitrol in many ways is just getting going after 10 years of warm-up. We're finally kind of getting to the big leagues now.
And now, your company I've always regarded as being incredibly responsible, but it's a political year, and there are broad brushes being painted. How do you get the message across that not all drug companies are doing the same thing?
I think you do it first by behaving responsibly, by doing the right thing, not overstating where you are, pricing your medicines fairly, and interacting with patients and payers and providers, and not just feeling like the medicine itself is the solution to all problems. It's part of overall treating a patient, and all that needs to be brought into consideration.
But can you, in your case, say, listen, this recidivism rate, because I want you to talk about that. What people, there are people who are being incarcerated because they're addicted to drugs, and if you could get them to be not addicted, they might not be repeat offenders.
That is exactly right.
And so tell us how that's going.
Our criminal justice system is replete with people who have chronic mental illness and addiction. And what we do is we serially incarcerate them and we don't treat them. And it makes no sense at all. Whether it's Vivitrol or other medications, we should be treating these patients more humanely. And we find that treatment actually works. And we can keep people, when we keep them out of prison, they can have jobs, they can be with their families, they can pay taxes. It's all good.
Well, your company has continually done great things. I was so thrilled, I have to tell you, when I saw the results. So I really hope for the good news for everybody. All right, that's Richard Pops, Chairman and CEO of Alkermes, a guy who's doing the right thing. Stick with Cramer. Booyah! Jim Cramer here from Mad Money. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube. Click here to subscribe and get the jump on my exclusives with CEOs, plus market news, investing advice, and a whole lot more.